Hello and welcome to Drilling Insight. I'm your host, Jeremy Verduzco, editor of National Driller. I'm joined today by expert drilling trainer, National Driller writer, and co-host Brock Yorty. With us is Tom Howe, Senior Geosciences Specialist at Western Michigan University. How are things with you, Tom?
I'm doing well. We're all healthy and safe, so that's all I can ask for.
Excellent, excellent, good news. And also joining us is Captain Jacob Fletcher of the U.S. Air Force, Red Horse Well Training Program. Hello, Jake. How's it going?
Hey, pretty good. We got back to work, so we're back to doing projects and doing construction. So,
the only thing a person can ask for is to be useful. So I'm glad you're there. So we're recording today's episode as we've seen state and regional events make the difficult decision to cancel for this summer. You know, a lot of our audience, they get their continuing education credits from these types of shows. So as people think about options for professional development and to get these required CEUs this summer, we roped in Tom and Jake to talk about these things, issues particular to this summer like Covid-19 and other current training issues. So thanks everyone for joining us. Let's get started. First, Tom, tell us about Western Michigan's Hydro Field Camp.
Sure. I've been a part of the program for about 10 years now. The program originally started 1987, and I direct the course along with Dr. Matt Reeves. He's my colleague there at Western Michigan. It's an applied training course that's really set up to give students the skills that they need to enter the workforce and kind of bridge the gap between the more traditional textbook learning that they learn in the university and getting some applied training that'll help them secure a job position. So,
okay.
It's one of the very few hydrotechnical programs in the United States, and I think it's one of the oldest and longest running also. And Brock actually helps me teach the module that's focused on drilling and well installation.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great time. All the students are very enthusiastic, and the 6 weeks they come together, and it's kind of like a family while they're in the drilling week. They go out. Tom finds projects for them where they get to go out, and sometimes they camp, and it's for 6 weeks at college, it's a blast. The things that Tom and Matt come up with. There's a 24-hour pumping test, right, Tom, where they stay out all night?
Yeah, it's definitely on the experiential end of the spectrum, and I find that a lot of the students, they really have that aha moment when they actually get their hands on stuff and see things happening. It's just that type of real world experience is what employers are looking for. And so they're able to gain some of that and say, yeah, I've done a little bit of this. So, yeah.
And with the age gap we have in our industry right now with, when the housing market shifted, engineering and geotech and water well drilling companies started having issues finding employees. And a lot of that had to do with they were going to college, or 9/11 happened and we had a lot of people enlist, and there's engineering happening there. So you have this capstone project of 6 weeks for the university, and then we got Captain Jake Fletcher here, who is the extreme opposite, active duty United States Air Force Red Horse engineers. I'm lucky that I get to come out and play with those guys and do some drilling with them as well. But, we got a 6-week practical field course. And then what is it, Jake, a minimum of 4 years? Tell us about your program.
So as far as the, before I start talking, I have to give my typical Air Force that any opinions expressed are mine and they're not of the U.S. Air Force. So That's my little sentence I'm required to say as far as public affairs go. But
What, you're not the whole Air Force?
I'm not. I don't represent the entire Air Force, so any opinions are specifically Captain Jake Fletcher's opinions or thoughts.
Of course.
But as far as, the unit, our unit goes back to Vietnam. It was originally founded as an airfield unit. The Air Force needed a unit to rapidly repair airfields. And along the way, the history and the development of engineering in the U.S. Air Force, the Air Force came up with the mindset or the thought that the two things needed to establish a working Air Force base is an airfield to get people and things in, and then a water source. So at the end of the day, those are the two basic functionalities, especially in Red Horse, which is the highly expeditionary unit. So as far as training for our drillers, we've used this time to kind of relook at our training. It's not as extensive as we'd like it to be. And I've worked a lot with Brock and Tom, whether it's sending data or asking questions or trying to get guys experience in their classes. But our training program is very minimal. It's a 2-week course. We rely more so on field experience and the people in our career field that have experience in drilling. So it's a very rustic kind of environment to learn drilling in. But that's how engineering in the U.S. Air Force is. The Air Force doesn't have time to wait for us to develop. They need things built, and we have to figure out how to go do it.
So you take 2 weeks and you get the primer going, and then you guys are active duty. You go out and do it, right? Regardless of, good or bad, you go out and you guys are successful. There's wells all over the world, thanks to the Red Horse and in the United States. So, the practical field application, which is very important to Tom's side of the group, you guys get to do on the government's dime.
Yeah, I like the way that Tom put it. It's bridging that gap. I think we rely more on that hands-on experience, but we would like to get some more of that classroom knowledge to get our guys a better basis of what they're actually doing beyond just making a hole in the earth.
Well, Tom, that's a great point, being able to get these guys, practical field and, some college knowledge. What's the recruitment process? I've been there with you, and, you have students from all over the country, the world. You have some professionals. Like, how does field camp, how do you get to become part of field camp? Is it pretty easy, sign up and go, or what?
We really look at it on a case-by-case basis when applications come in. Generally, there is a prerequisite to take the course that you've had some kind of an introductory course in hydrogeology, but we do have some leeway, and I certainly look at people's personal experiences when we get applications in. We do give preference to people that want to take all 6 weeks because it's a lot easier logistically to have somebody for 6 weeks than to have a different. It is a module, 1 week, 1 credit module each week. Okay. So when we do have somebody that's just interested in finding out, getting some experience in drilling and well installation, they can sign up for that 1 week. One caveat to that is that we probably will talk a little more about this, the safety component, but we do require everybody that takes our camp to have a 40-hour OSHA HAZWOPER certification. And we do offer that as part of the 6-week training program also. So,
okay. So how many people do you typically get in for the 6-week program?
Yeah, it varies year to year. A couple of years ago, we were at a point where we couldn't accommodate everybody. And so we went to doing 2 6-week sessions, one that actually would be going on right now, and another that's slated to start just after the 4th of July. I think, I've had as many as 30, 31, 32 in a class. It's really tough to manage that many people, especially on an active drill site. Yeah. 24 is really the number that I think is reasonable. So anywhere between 12 to 24 would be pretty standard, I think.
Gotcha. Well, too much interest is a good problem to have.
Yeah. for sure.
So Jake, if I were to go into like a recruiter office or something like that, like how do I get into the Red Horse? Do I just go in and say, hey, I want to be a driller? How does that happen?
So it's it's interesting. A recruiter might not necessarily even know that Red Horse has drilling capabilities for one.
Okay.
The career field that you would say is that you want to be a heavy equipment operator, because the people that we train to drill are heavy equipment operators. So normally they would be doing graders, dozers, those kinds of things. So we treat the drilling rig as a piece of equipment, and so we train equipment operators to run it. So you wouldn't get sent to Red Horse in your first assignment. Red Horse is very adamant that they want you to have 2 to 3 years experience in the Air Force before they determine whether or not they want to select you to come here. It's a little different on the enlisted side, because now they're doing a program where they make enlisted folks switch between prime beef, which is normal engineering in the Air Force, and then Red Horse. So
Okay.
it's breeding that cross functionality instead of just having people bounce from Red Horse unit to Red Horse unit, because that's how it used to be. If you went to Red Horse, you just stayed in Red Horse. And
Okay.
unfortunately for officers, I only get one tour. Typically most officers get one tour in Red Horse. So from my side, it's even more difficult to get here because it's super selective. They look at your records. They want highly experienced, high-performing engineers. So, to keep up with the fast-paced challenges of everything that we do.
Yeah, guys that are going to pick it up and run with it with minimal training and oversight. Yeah. So both of you guys conduct trainings. What kind of materials do you use when you're training students? Tom, what kind of methods and materials are you using?
Sure. So, I mean, over the years, we've developed our own course pack that we provide to the students. I like to give them hard copies so they can follow along when we're doing classroom stuff. But then we also, provide digital copies. We want the students to take that stuff with them. We really like the groundwater and wells book. It's kind of a thick book. It's not something you can teach in 1 week, but you certainly can highlight and, read this, because tomorrow we're going out to do mud rotary. So read the chapter on drilling fluids and on rotary methods or whatever. So that's kind of our textbook that we use. The big thing that I think is maybe one of the most important places that they get their information from is from working with drilling contractors and getting to interact and communicate and ask questions of them. I think that's really kind of where they a lot of times have the aha moment, oh, we've been talking about this, but now I actually see what's going on. And why are you doing it that way? Ask those questions. I think that's where a lot of the most beneficial information comes from, because anybody can order a book on Amazon, but
Yeah.
it doesn't always transfer to knowledge gained for those students, I don't think.
So Jake, what kind of materials do you use to kind of foster those aha moments with the folks you train?
So it's fairly similar. We have our own book that we also print. What's interesting and what I love about working with people like Tom and Brock is they're very open to sharing their syllabus, their course information, to show us what they're teaching people, because we are in the process of trying to update the methods and the drilling techniques that we teach. So they're very open and helping about it. Aside from that, we're very fortunate out here because we have so much land. So we have the ability to go out and actually take our rig out and put it in the field and fire it up. We also have training lanes where we practice setting casing. We have the ability to run pump tests. So we have the tools that we need. It's just we're working at this point to update things and get the training where it needs to be, in our opinion.
That's practical field application, along with coming up with ways of teaching textbook. It's very much about the experience we can get our students. And I've seen Tom host things like that, and I've seen the Red Horse from 10 years ago with Nate Laidlaw through coming to work with Captain Jake Fletcher. The same thing, and it's that how do we merge, because our industry is very much about the tribal knowledge and about Tom just mentioned it. How do you get an engineer? How do you get a hydrogeologist to be able to approach a driller? And I just had that Ask Brock this week, and for you guys, what is the ideal experience? What's when we can get the students in the field? Right behind me right now is one of Tom's classes from a few years ago, where we got out on a big geothermal project and they got to get muddy and touch things and stuff. But Tom, what's a win for you to get the students out, especially for drilling aspect? What do you look for?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest challenges for me, just the short duration, is I don't know what all these people are going to go on to do. They may be during this developing like a passion for the water well or the well or drilling, industrial drilling industry. So it's all very new, but to them. But I think that being able to expose them to a variety of different methods in a short amount of time. And a lot of times, like I mentioned before, we're working with contractors and they maybe get permission from a homeowner to allow us to come out and watch a water well be drilled on their property. So I want to be able to expose them to as many different methods as possible. And also building relationships with these people so that they are comfortable being around students. A lot of drillers, sometimes I don't think, like being asked questions, or there's some kind of a barrier between a new guy and somebody that's been doing it a long time, as to like being afraid to ask a question that they might, think is a stupid question or whatever. So having being able to work with people that are willing to communicate and not be afraid to say if they don't know something, those are, I feel like a lot of the best knowledge comes out of like when stuff didn't go how you wanted it to. So there's that little bit of like embarrassment of, oh, this didn't work exactly like I thought it would. But from a learning perspective, I mean, those are the key moments that people really pick up on and learn from, I think. So it doesn't always have to go perfectly, but just if I can give them a broad overview, that's not just all drilling, it's water systems, it's the geology, it's a little bit of everything, going to different sites where they can pick up on that situational awareness, and just being put into a position where they're not totally prepared, like that's where the growth happens, I think. So
that's the teachable lessons come from our failures. That's obviously you and I have seen that a lot on some jobs with students, and I've experienced with Jake. And Jake, same question about your experience, but Tom hit on a point about being able to talk to different people, the different interactions we have. And then you have one more tier higher where you have civil engineering, and then you have senior leadership all going, what's going on today? Drilling, we have these teachable lessons, but now we also have to communicate it up the chain, from that best experience to how do you tell the colonel or, the lieutenant colonel what's going on, as you have a big muddy job site like mine behind me.
So I think it starts with developing a culture. Well drilling in the Air Force has, in the past, it's been a lot of people, it goes back to what you said, Brock, a lot of people don't understand the importance or that we even do drilling. So naturally they downplay it, or they think that it's not important. And so the guys, one of the first things I had to do when I took over the team was reinstill this idea that, hey, this is important and it's enjoyable. You know, when I first took over the team, the guys just looked miserable, like they weren't excited to be a well driller. And so, you know, we took little steps like cleaning up the warehouse, doing these little things, giving them a little bit of ownership and saying, hey, this is important. Somebody does care about this, and we're gonna move to improve this. So it starts on that ground level. And every class we have that comes through here, because a lot of people that get put into drilling in the Air Force don't do it by choice. So when we do have classes, it's one of the important things, in my opinion, and I always step in and I always explain why it's important and how valuable of a skill set that it is. Because so many people can say, well drillers, you know, they do whatever they do. But when you step into a class and you explain to somebody, hey, you've just started the process of learning a skill set that no one else in your career field has. You know, it's such a small amount of people in the Air Force. And then, you know, as far as an organizational level, when you communicate to higher leadership, really you have to present it on a big picture level. So you go from a tactical level with your team and building that camaraderie on the tactical level. And then you go to the commander and you say, hey, this capability is important. And this is what allows troops to forward advance or to go places where there might not be a water source for us to produce one. And so it's critical and it's important that even if you don't understand it, sir, to support it and to, you know, allow us to do what we do best and figure this process out. It's not always easy. Not every leader is. Go ahead, Jeremy. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, I was just going to say I had never thought about the situation of the Red Horse where you know, basically have to serve multiple masters. You have to communicate one way to the brass, one way to the customer, or, you know, whatever the situation might be. But I'd never thought about that. That's an interesting point, Brock.
And there's joint operations. And so, you know, you're working with different branches. And, you know, Jake, I you know, getting to spend 10 years with the Red Horse, it's not different than the hydro field camp to this. You know, as years progress, you know, people are out doing. So you got deployments. There's more than just the 820 that is drilling water wells, and 820 has the responsibility to train. So, you know, you have a training program, and anybody that's enthusiastic, that's a great trainer. You know, again, I mentioned a good friend of mine, Nate Laidlaw. He got promoted, you know, and being, you know, a non-commissioned officer, you know, he's gone, you know, and he's worked years to get back to where he can be part of drilling. And so it's, there's a lot of cool things going on in the Air Force, from, you know, the planes to deployments to all this stuff. And then you have water well drilling, and it is, you know, one of those, I got to go play in the mud now. So yeah, I get that. Get us back on track for both of, we'll go with Tom first. You know, training situations, you've done this for 10 years, you know, what's the worst circumstance that can arise during a training week? You know, weather, project delays, equipment down. What's, you know, what really kills a week?
I think the one thing that really can kill a week is a bad egg of a student that's not taking it seriously and doesn't encourage their cohorts to do the same. That, above anything, I think could be is the worst case scenario for me. So I mean, weather, of course, we have some contingency plans if there's weather. You know, I have a well in the basement of one of our buildings, we can go do some gamma logging. There's ancillary things we can do. We can go to the core lab at WMU and look at some drill core and work on boring logs and you know, making cross sections, 3-point problems. You know, there's other stuff we can do. But yeah, that's, for me, the worst case is when you have one person that's doing something that or a group of people that are doing things that, you know, jeopardize the safety and the camaraderie and the integrity of the learning process for everybody. That's my one thing that I don't like happening. And all our students know, I mean, it's not a normal class. Like if they're doing something that's jeopardizing the safety of the group or something, like we'll get you a bus ticket, you know, because we can't have that.
Yeah. What about you, Jake? What's your nightmare scenario?
You know, I mean, so I like that you brought up the personnel aspect. I didn't think of that, but we're fortunate in the military that we have a little bit more muscle that we can flex if somebody is getting out of line. As far as you could give them paperwork, or you could certainly send them home. That's in our reporting instructions, that if you break the rules of our course, we will not hesitate to send you home. But for us, I mean, a big issue is it's always equipment. We always have problems with our equipment, it seems like, every time we fire it up. And we're working currently with the maker of our rig and equipment to sort out those issues and get our mechanics that we have trained and properly educated on how to service our rig to fix those issues. But it's typically the biggest thing that happens is equipment. And then the site that we actually do our drilling in drilling in Nevada is very, very difficult. There's a lot of fractures in the earth. So we typically don't make it very far when we do training as far as drilling, but we do our best.
It's teachable drilling.
It is, yeah, it's very teachable drilling.
So both of you work with training programs that are, you know, usually done in person. And so how I know, Tom, you mentioned your program is not being held this summer. Have you seen any other effects? Like, are you going to have one later in the summer? How's the current situation impacted Western's program?
Sure. Well, I mean, the universities in general are really struggling right now. We're looking at, you know, layoffs and pay cuts and all that kind of stuff. So we did, like I said, we usually do 2 a summer. Our summer one, our original plan when this COVID stuff came out was we tried to get everybody we could into the summer 2 session, which is we still haven't. The administration still hasn't made a call on whether or not they will allow us to hold the program during the summer too. I mean, this has got to be on the farthest end of the spectrum, really, of courses that could be put online. Certainly there are components, but I really feel like it's a field camp, and it's the experiences of participating is where most of the value really is gained on that. So whether or not it'll happen summer 2, I'm literally waiting right now to find out, because I have a lot of students coming from, you know, all over the Western Hemisphere are, you know, kind of anticipating like what's going to happen. And so we're gonna have to make a call pretty soon on that. Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Jake? How's this affected Red Horse training?
Pretty much. So we don't just do drilling training here. We do special capabilities training for all of our heavy construction capabilities. So currently all of our classes are canceled at the moment. We're not quite sure when they're even going to come back online. So we're using this time right now to clean up the inventory, get the equipment serviced, and we're working. Brock has been in on conference calls with us. We're working on updating the syllabus and updating the training course to improve the training. So
okay.
Using this
so
time.
Oil in the rig and decon.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's funny because we find ourselves working 100 miles an hour all the time. You know, from what I see Tom do throughout the year and what I see with Jake, with these guys preparing for deployments, and this 60 days of slow down has given us some time to reflect on drilling methods, what we'd really like to teach, what else. You know, every year when we get done with a drilling week, or I wrap up with both of these guys I'll have a beer with. I mean, they like beer like I like beer, and water. We need water for beer. Yeah. And you know, we go, man, we should really next year make sure we we put this in there. And some of them we get in there, and others we blink because there's a lot of stuff going on and we don't get to it. And then we go, we said last year. So now we've had this moment, this reprieve, and yeah, we are taking some time for reflection, and it's good.
Mm-hmm. So when it does come to training about drilling, well installation, testing, that sort of thing, are there any skills or concept that lend themselves well to online training? I mean, we've done trainings on some topics, but we've shied away from others here. What are some topics that would lend themselves well to online training for this industry?
Yeah, I think that some of the like grain size analysis and screen sizing, that stuff could be taught over video. As far as, you're plotting points on a curve and matching it up, like that kind of stuff probably you can do. More of the math end of things. Logs, I think, are always good, correlating boring logs, creating cross sections, that kind of stuff. Can be done. Water systems and well designed, some of that kind of, like I said, more the math oriented things.
Yeah.
You can present data sets and ask people to solve and come up with recommendations.
Yeah, all the exciting stuff.
Yeah.
So what about you? What about you, Jake? Do you see any skills that you regularly teach that could be readily kind of moved to a web-based learning?
So the interesting part of this is we're having this discussion now is, and the reason why is because the majority of the drillers that the Air Force have are in the Guard and Reserve. So we obviously have teams that are active duty, but the majority of the drillers available are in the Guard and Reserve. And so as far as funding to get them to training, we have a limited window of 2 weeks. So, the commanders above me, that command the units, said, how can we make this training work better in a short period of time? So a lot of those things that Tom brought up and Brock has been in on these discussions about what can we put online for people to do before they get to the course so that we can give them more time on the equipment, because they're going to take that course and typically they're going to go deploy within the next 2 to 4 months. So that's what we're pushing towards. And so a lot of those skills, the time we spend on the math or the groundwater sciences, those things, those lend themselves well to computer-based training. And so when we get people here, we can put them on the rig.
Yeah. So from your point of view, it's just about getting higher quality time once you do get back out in the field for training. So thinking about that, what are the skills that really demand in-person training? I hear so many drillers talk about the feel of the feedback the rig gives you, that sort of thing. Like, what kind of things just absolutely can't translate?
Yeah, one of the biggest ones for me is building that situational awareness and reflecting on the individual project that you're working on and how to do it safely. The interaction between people, which is really key to success. And I feel that's something that I just don't feel like you can do virtually necessarily, but there's some stuff you can talk about till your face is blue, but until you actually are put in the position where it's actually going on, that's tough. Yeah.
Jake?
I would say the biggest thing for us is safety, and that's the number one thing I've been pushing since I took over the team. Is some people would say, sure, you could put up PowerPoints or whatever about safety procedures and plans, but until you're out on site and you're explaining to someone that a 300-pound piece of steel is in the air and you need to pay attention, or a line snaps and almost, a hose blows and almost hits somebody in the head. Until those things happen, people don't really have an appreciation for safety. And it's you know, I always say that drilling is the most dangerous capability we have here because, and some people would say that explosive demolition is, but you can see what you're blowing up if you're blowing something up. But when you're drilling a
Okay.
hole in the earth, you have no idea what's going on.
Okay.
You know, that's a great point, Jake, because, and Tom hit on it too. There's something about being on the back of a rig, watching cuttings come out of the hole, you know, whatever the weather is, that entire experience of discovering the unknown and holding those cuttings in your hands and having that watching the nuance of the driller make a split-second decision that is so minute that we go, wait, why did he just come up off bottom, or why did she just increase rotation? Those are the things that we can watch all the movies, and you know, Michael Bay and those guys can make that stuff look sexy, but it's not as cool as being there in person. And I think that's what gets students excited. When Tom and I have a week of rain and we end up spending, you know, 2 or 3 days in the classroom and trying to pull up YouTubes and stuff, the students don't have the big awestruck, like, oh, this is drilling, as they do when we're on the back of the rig and we make water come out of the ground, or that company does, and everybody's like, I'm going to be a well driller today. You know, there's just something better about it. So.
Yeah. So Tom, when you get back to training, are there protocols or, you know, structures you're going to put into place that are aimed at making this in-person training safer?
We're constantly evolving our safety. That's an ongoing thing that evolves, and we're constantly looking at it. I don't know that I have specifically one item in mind right now, but you know, safety wise, big things for me are, like I mentioned, that we require everybody to have that OSHA 40-hour training. Ours specifically is very hands-on and presenting them with scenarios, going out to sites that this might be a site that you're working on, look around and tell me what are the things that you should be concerned about.
And it's hazmat, right?
It's emergency response, hazardous waste operations, all that kind of stuff. So, because you never know. I mean, there could be coal tar all of a sudden coming up out of your hole that you didn't expect, and you have to go level A PPE at the drop of a dime. So, building site-specific health and safety plans, I think, is really key. Being able to control what you can in your environment, and then what Jake touched on too, like regular equipment maintenance is really key. But stuff can and will go wrong. So
of course.
Being prepared when something does, and having a plan of what you're going to do if and when something does go wrong, is utmost important to us, especially with new students out there. So
what about you, Jake?
You know, I think for us, I mean, a lot of the men and women that come through are, you know, either still teenagers, 18, 19, or just entering their 20s. And so I think the key for us is consistently reiterating the safety procedures, you know, and the safety points that we hit in our safety program. I think it's, you know, it gets annoying, and I don't know if it's just a military thing, but we always consistently repeat ourselves when it comes to safety, because people become complacent. You know,
I'm sorry, what were you saying?
You know, they get distracted. I've heard Brock talk about this. Cell phones on job sites. I have been on not only drilling sites, but I have been on project sites where I have taken every cell phone of the airman on the job site because somebody hit something with a piece of equipment, and I had the authority to do that as a captain. So it's just, you know, eliminating those distractions and reiterating over and over till it becomes second nature, that these people are always thinking about safety.
So we've hit on safety. We've hit on, you know, learning materials and stuff. Let's go with Jake first. The goal of your 2 weeks of your program, what is that ultimate goal, and how do you get your people excited about it?
So, you know, I think a lot of there's two differing opinions of our 2-week course, you know, and they're moving to develop two separate courses. So the first of the two would be an initial training. And I think a lot of people, and we try to reiterate this, that this 2-week course does not make you qualified to go run a drilling project. And now we're changing the requirements to be that you would take that initial course, you would go complete a project either in the States or on a deployment, and then you would come back to an advanced course where you could then be a ship lead or a lead driller eventually. So we're working towards that progression because in the past it's just been, well, I took my 2-week course, I got to deploy, I got to go drill a well, and then you come back and you might not even have done a good job on your well, but you become someone who is considered a driller. And so we're trying to get away from that and develop a progression for people to move up in the drilling program.
Mm-hmm.
Tom?
Yeah, I think the end goal for me really is to produce young people or produce knowledgeable people that are not afraid to ask questions and that have enough background that they can make decisions on site to protect themselves, protect the project, and then also protect the health and safety of the environment also while they're drilling. You know, oh, we went through a clay layer. Oh, well, we weren't expecting that. Well, what do we do? You know, and just if they're not sure, that they're not afraid to ask someone that has more knowledge than they do, but just that they have that in the forefront of their minds. But ultimately, I'm just trying to create, you know, put out people that are marketable and that have the skill sets that'll enable them to find a job, really. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm curious, how much classroom time do your students get versus hands-on? Jake, what's your mix look like for your 2-week program?
Currently, the layout that we were using before we shut down classes is typically the first 2 to 3 days are classroom work, and then we try to maximize as much time out in the field doing practical application. And so the intent is to maximize that even further with any computer-based training we can take advantage of.
Okay, Tom?
Yeah, I'd say just to throw a number, probably 20% classroom. And when I say classroom, that also means touring a well driller's shop and looking at all the bits and pieces and what goes into preparing them before they head out for the day. I consider that classroom because it's not actually out drilling, doing stuff, but probably 20% classroom, 80% field. So we'll typically start a day, everybody meet up in the class. We'll talk about a little bit about the overview of the method that we're going to see, talk about the site, go over our health and safety plan, you know, prepare everybody, and then head out. We try to be as field heavy as possible. Like I said, I think that's where the knowledge is really gained.
So speaking of field heavy, Tom, how many, you know, it's 6-week modules and you've opened it up. I know that I've met non-college students in there, you know, professionals that are, you know, already in the field, regulators, you know, there may be some drillers here going, I can spend a week learning about drilling and then do aquifer testing or something. Like, how many non-student, you know, participants do you get in the class?
Not as many as I would like. I think it really adds a lot of value to the experience when we have people that are out working in industry or working in the regulatory field that come back, and everybody kind of looks at them a little differently, and they definitely add something to the group. I can't put a pinpoint on exactly what it is, but you know, typically maybe we'll have 2, 3 out of the group of 20 that aren't traditional students that are about to graduate or grad students taking this. I'd like to see more. We're always having conversations with people and they're saying they want to send somebody out to learn about groundwater sampling or whatever, and whether or not they actually do it, you know, doesn't always happen. But I think that just there might be a little bit of an intimidation factor on those people, like are scared to go back into their college environment or something,
Yeah.
because it's going to be looked at differently than the rest of the students. I don't know, but the more the better, in my opinion. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Jake, obviously, we don't have to ask about recruitment because you get signed up and then you get chosen, you know, to be heavy equipment and whatnot. So, dude, let's talk about, you know, your training to drill water wells, often in conflicts and fobs that don't have water that we need a strategic position. Like, how do you plan that route? You know, we're talking about a contagious virus right now, and obviously there's got to be times where you guys have to have mop gear nearby. Like, how do you guys just take that all from your secondary training and bring it in? Or, you know, it's got to be something we think about when we lay jobs out and stuff.
So it's, you know, especially Red Horse, you know, when we're preparing to go overseas, there's always a whole meal of training that you have to go through. The interesting thing about our unit is that typically we provide our own security. So in addition to drilling a well, you're going to have somebody out there, and typically if we're going to a new site, typically there's no fence line, there's nothing, you're just in the middle of nowhere. So you're really reliant on the people that are on your team to take care of each other. You know, I would say never having planned, you know, I wasn't in during the times when we were doing wells at forward operating bases in Iraq and Afghanistan, but I've heard stories of officers and teams that were over there, and it's, you know, that's another reason why I say it's probably the most dangerous job in Red Horse, because it's a giant target. You know, you have a mass sticking up in the air, and the enemy knows that what you're doing is ultimately going to win the support of the people that they're trying to oppress. So from a strategic standpoint, I mean, that's why it's so important is, you know, it undermines people that want to do bad things to good people. If we can provide them with a water source, because typically when we leave, you know, we leave that water source for people in the area, or sometimes we'll drill them a well just as a humanitarian effort. So it's just a matter of being prepared for anything, not only when it comes to drilling, but, you know, using that military training, that military discipline to be prepared. You know, that's why when we design our rig and they ask us, you know, how we want it delivered, it's a truck mounted rig. So if something happens to the truck, we can detach the rig from the truck and keep going. So all those different things play a part.
Trailer mounted rig on a truck.
Trailer mounted, sorry. Yeah. All of those things play a part in how we not only go about doing the project, but how we even order our equipment to be made for us. So.
Yeah, and drilling is tough enough work without someone trying to take pot shots at you from from a hill nearby or something. Yeah. So I mean, drilling, water, they're both very important. What motivates each of you to teach about these things? What Tom, what brought you to teaching water, drilling, you know, teaching what you do?
Yeah, so actually I fell down a well when I was a little kid. No. I tell people that.
Little Tommy Howe lost in Madawan down the well.
You've been saving that up.
I have. No, I love working outside. I love working with people, especially those that are hungry for knowledge. Their excitement excites me. Obviously, I mean, water is one of our most vital, important natural resources, and it's a global issue. Not just always providing water, but is that water going to be safe for use? You know, I mean, it's something I made a decision at a point in my life that this is an industry that I felt like I could help the world by being involved in, and so
Now, Tom,
I regretted it.
you took the field camp and then went and became a driller, right? How did you get back to?
Interesting.
Yeah, you were a driller, right?
No, I worked as a geologist for an engineering company, and I really enjoyed that work. I think I probably would still be there if Western hadn't reached out to me and thought, that I might be a good person to take over the guy that was doing my job before I'm doing my job. So that's one of the cool things about this industry is you meet people and the opportunities present themselves to you that if you're doing good, people know who you are, and you should never have trouble finding work as far as I can tell.
Gotcha. So Jake, what motivates your training efforts?
So actually, I was one of those people that when I came in the Air Force, I didn't know that we had a well drilling capability. I got selected as a civil engineer, and I enjoy construction work because I like to think that my job is to put the world back together a little bit after things happen, and people have conflicts. I enjoy the fact that our job is to build things and to make people's lives better or put things back together again. But it was actually, I was getting ready to come to this assignment, and I came down for a visit, and Brock was giving a talk about drilling. And I remember sitting there, and I my background is in water systems, my degree. And so I remember sitting there and I said, I understand a lot of this. I've heard a lot of this before. And then I learned about well drilling and that we had a well drilling team. And so when they gave me, because of my background, the opportunity, and we, this is the first time probably in a long time or ever that an officer has led a drilling team in the Air Force. It's typically just been an enlisted position, but the Air Force and the people in the unit thought that an officer should get involved so that they could advocate for the people on the team. The long story short, it was working with Brock and developing a friendship and, not only a professional relationship, but Brock is one of my very best friends, and he inspired me and made me have a passion for drilling. It's the industry that I hope to work in. I love the idea of bringing water out of the ground. I think as far as doing things, there's few things that you could do in the world that are better than bringing water out of the ground to provide for people. So, and I try to pass that along to people when they come through the course.
Yeah, well, Brock is kind of infectious and not in a pandemic way. He's very.
I've sent my Venmo already to Jake and Tom for saying nice things about me. I appreciate it, guys. It's on its way.
Yes. But he definitely has a passion for the industry, and I've seen it at work. So thanks, Tom and Jake. You've given us a lot to think about as we, as our audience develops their continuing education plans for 2020. One of the things that I hadn't thought about before was the concept of you can't teach situational awareness on the internet. You can't, hold a pipe over someone's head while they're on a Zoom conference and get them to think it's, what do you think, Brock? I mean, we've had kind of a wide-ranging discussion.
You're absolutely right. It's we got to come up with the best continuing education we can do via this time of distance learning and this last our industry. Every time there's a downturn, if it's the housing market or oil and gas or construction, those an election year, we slow down and we don't maximize the time to come up with. It's like, shoot, we're slowed down. Why aren't we teaching, more creative things with Zoom, with the backgrounds doing this where we could point stuff? We could do better at some of this interactive learning, but the actual vibrations and those type of things, there's nothing better than hands-on.
Yeah, for sure. So with that, we'll wrap up today's episode. Thanks again to Tom Howe and Jake Fletcher. Where can the audience find out more about you and your programs?
Sure. For me, if you just Google WMU Hydrogeology Field Camp, even the word hydrogeology, we pop right up there, interestingly. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, or we also have a Facebook page for the WMU Hydrogeology Field Camp.
Okay. Jake?
Yeah, for us, you know, if you Google Red Horse, you're probably just going to find a history lesson about the unit. But I'm on LinkedIn myself, or I can give you guys my email. People can always send me questions, or if they're interested in the Air Force or Red Horse or any of it, you know, I'll do my best. If I can't answer, I'll get them to the person that can answer the question. So,
You know,
Okay.
both the Red Horse, the opportunity, if a recruiter had told me I could have, as a young man in the drilling industry, looking at how am I going to pay for college and things, if I'd known I could have went and became a water well driller around the world and then came back to dad's drilling company, that would have been awesome. And on that same level, when I was, you know, in college and deciding what I wanted to do, if somebody had said, did you know while you're doing your geology stuff, you know, there's this hydro field camp? And, you know, or as a professional, as I was with Bayreuth, to be able to have come back and taken the drilling week with those students or that type of stuff. These two courses are very important and an untapped resource for a lot of our industry.
Okay. So, yep, both good programs. I encourage the audience to check them out. So thanks again, Tom and Jake, and visit www.nationaldriller.com for the latest drilling industry news and, of course, more videos like this one. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. See you next time on Drilling Insight.